I've lost count of how many days we've been here, but it's definitely more than 28.
Yeah, this is about 56 days later, I think.
56 days since the COVID lockdown began, and you find us this evening, America's most enraged podcast, The Pod People. I'm Matisse Van Rossum, and I just woke up, I'm naked, and I don't know what's going on.
God damn it, I was going to do the same thing.
Swiped.
I'm Ben, and I don't know what you guys are talking about. I haven't really been paying attention to the news.
Hi, I'm Cleveland Mosier, and despite all my rage, I'm still just a chimp in a cage.
Oh, damn, that's a good one.
There you go.
I came up with it
Home run.
after you hit record.
Nice, man. That's the best ones. Tonight, we find ourselves back in the year 2002, a year where we've spent a lot of time recently, and somehow we keep finding our way back here. But if only we could go back to actual 2002, instead of just through the medium of film.
Back to the George W. Bush presidency.
God, yeah.
Well, I'm just thinking pre-COVID.
Yeah, this is a weird feeling.
I'm just thinking pre-COVID, baby. And in 2002, I was 9 years old. And that was probably an okay time to be 9. So this week, as promised, we're talking about the zombie classic from 2002, 28 Days Later, directed by Danny Boyle, written by Alex Garland.
Oh,
and
Danny Boyle, the piper, he is peeping from mountaintop. All right, let's start getting old. All right, you can carry on. Sorry.
The film stars Cillian Murphy, Naomi Harris, Brendan Gleeson, and Megan Burns.
And despite his name, this is a serious role. He's not silly and around.
God damn it. I didn't know if you were talking about him or Brendan Gleeson.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. So yeah, 28 Days Later. I haven't seen this movie in probably a decade. This was your first time seeing it, Cleveland?
Yeah, I had somehow never seen this one. I talk a lot about how I live under a rock, but yeah, this is definitely a film that you would have to be living under a rock to have not seen. Like, it is so deeply ingrained in pop culture. Its influences and references are obviously found everywhere, especially after watching the movie. That's very loudly apparent.
I feel like this movie is the first major modern zombie movie in this generation.
More so than that, this film kind of revitalized the whole zombie genre and was sort of revolutionary too, because this is like the first media appearance of fast zombies. I can't think of one before this where the zombies aren't slow, shambling, moaning corpses returned from the dead.
I've definitely heard it credited as that. I don't have the numbers on it, but it would seem to be.
If not the first, certainly what popularized it. And like you said, the influences on other media after this are everywhere. Like, Left 4 Dead would not exist without this movie.
Yeah, Left 4 Dead, Walking Dead.
Well, The Walking Dead might still exist, but it definitely rips off its opening.
So, weird thing for me is I watched the first couple seasons of Walking Dead before getting...
Yeah, back when it was still good.
Yeah, but before
when Frank
I got over
Darabont
it.
was involved.
Yeah, the Shine episode is, I think, when I stopped watching. Or Carl, that's it, yeah. Carl!
Yeah. Which one? He does that so many times in the
prison
series.
one.
Carl!
There's that Carl scene.
Carl!
Let's be honest.
Yeah, there's only one.
Carl!
So yeah, I got that far with Walking Dead when it was airing. And is it still on?
It is.
Christ.
They just
Have
finished
mercy.
their 10th season.
God.
I think.
I guess good for them. I don't really hold any resentment towards it.
I
but
think
got
it's
tired
supposed
of
to be their last season, but they also have that spin-off show now.
Oh yeah, Fear the Walking Dead.
So it's never really over.
No one's ever really gone.
So the reason we brought it up is because it starts the exact same way. What the fuck?
Yeah.
Like, what? I had no idea. Like, guy wakes up from a coma in a hospital. Like
doesn't know that the apocalypse has happened.
Yeah, you can only do that once in a zombie film, no less. Like, it's the same apocalypse and everything. Like, why don't I hear about that more often? That, like, they just straight ripped it.
I think it's more intelligently handled in this movie.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah.
You know, a lot of the world building is done really organically in that whole sequence. He wakes up, he is confused because everything is in shambles in the hospital, everything's empty. He goes out to the streets, all the streets are empty. He sees a newspaper on the ground that says something about evacuation, and then he sees that big wall of notes. People
looking
that
for
are missing
family members and stuff.
I think that's such a brilliant and tight and economical way of giving you all that backstory without having any sort of real expository dialogue.
It is very economic.
I really wish that the movie actually started with Cillian Murphy waking up in the hospital. I like things about the introductory scene where we see like where the outbreak came from, but I think it would be so much cooler to like not have any of that context right off the bat, to just start with Cillian Murphy waking up in the hospital and seeing like London completely abandoned and us figuring it out with him. I think that would be way more effective, because like the first scene is like eco-terrorists breaking into like an animal testing lab to like free a bunch of chimpanzees.
I thought it was fun. I did like the intro.
It's fun. I mean, the scene is well handled. I like that.
It's very Resident
scene.
Evil.
It is. Yeah, it's very Resident Evil.
I mean, this whole movie is.
The characters are very stupid, in true horror movie fashion. I think I love the way that scene is shot and how it's lit, but I feel like it almost gives away too much right off the bat.
I almost feel like it's a little more campy than the rest of the movie, especially the doctor.
Oh yeah. And how they just ignore him. He's like, it's infected with rage. And like, cool, let's let it out of the cage.
Right, exactly. Like, I don't agree with animal testing any more than most people do, but like, if I was in that situation and the doctor that was working there was like, don't let the monkeys out, they're infected, they're gonna infect you, I wouldn't be like, fuck you, doctor, I'm letting these beautiful monkey beasts out.
Right, and they could just have them say it like as they're opening the cage. Or like once it's come out during the pandemonium.
He straight up tells them.
He's just like no, it's infected with rage. While it's ripping a guy apart. Done. Like problem solved.
In fairness, he's a little bit. I think he's a little unnecessarily vague. He just says he says they're infected, and they say infected with what? He just says rage,
right? Which is like, he's a scientist. He's not like a theater.
It's a cool line, but like, yeah, I would tell him like, there's a virus, like it's a virus. It's highly contagious. It's like rabies. They're basically rabid. Like that's what I would have said.
Yeah, like it just that sounds to me like a theater practice teaching thing. Is like, all right, you're infected with rage. Go.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of thing is like the calling card of a young writer, which Alex Garland was. I think he was about 30 when he wrote this script. His stuff has improved a lot.
Do you think that sequence was in the original draft, or do you think it was added after the fact?
Ooh, I think so.
It feels.
I think you're right.
I was about to bring that up. I think it feels added after the fact. I wouldn't be surprised
if some executive was like,
"This is too confusing.
Why did the outbreak happen? Outbreaks don't happen for no reason. Someone had to eat a bat soup or something."
Yikes.
The original wet market. I think you're absolutely right, though. It feels like the studio, whoever produced this film, being like, it's too vague, him waking up in the hospital, and it's too long before something exciting happens. We need something to like hook the viewer. And I think it's probably smart for like your average moviegoer, like start them with something exciting and spooky. But I don't know. I think it would be way cooler to just like see Cillian Murphy waking up in a totally abandoned London and what the fuck is going on.
Well, and the movie's so much from his point of view that having a scene completely separate from that just feels off.
Yeah.
In some respects. I definitely agree. And I think the funny thing about that too is I think the pacing of the whole of the movie, but especially the beginning of the movie, it isn't particularly slow. Like you get that, opening sequence where he's wandering through, but like 5 minutes in, he gets to the church and shit goes awry.
And I
know?
think that's a way better reveal for the zombies than like rage monkeys at the beginning. I love that scene when he goes to the church. Like that slow pan when he's walking up the stairs and somebody has just smeared on the wall, repent, the end is extremely fucking nigh. And then he like goes up into the balcony and just looks down and sees all of the corpses, just like the dozens and dozens of bodies in the church. That's a way cooler reveal.
It was spooky too when he calls out and like two of the people looked up.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and they
that's
have that kind of like blank primal sort of expression that all of the zombies have. I guess that's a good segue. What do y'all think of the zombies in this movie?
Good. I think, well, no, if I could summarize them in one word, it'd be jump cuts.
What do you mean?
You never see him for like more than like a second. Every time a zombie shows up, like they're constantly like, cutting. It's just
The editing's pretty frenetic. I get the feeling that's largely
and
to hide some of the makeup.
I definitely want to talk more about the overall style of that stuff, but we'll get into that.
we can talk about the zombies
with
first,
the zombies themselves. I think they're fun, and I think
I love the contacts.
the approach of making it a disease rather than coming back from the
corpses
dead.
are coming back from the dead. Yeah.
It's a very modern take, and I think it's welcome, and it's super influential to where zombies have gone since then.
They're almost
Yeah,
exclusively
it's
plague
basically
now, yeah.
it's basically just like hyper rabies, which is cool conceptually and now has been done to death. And it's interesting to watch this movie now and to like see some of the stuff they do and be like, ugh, that's so tropey, and then be like, oh no, wait, this was the start of that trope. This is the origin of those tropes.
I wish I'd watched this movie like 10 years ago.
I think I saw it for the first time when I was like 13 or something, 13 or 14.
Yeah, that would have been a great time to see it.
It's very British. Just the style of it is very British. Like the aesthetic. It looks like something that would be on the BBC from like 2002, 2003.
Let's dig into the style.
Yeah, because you wanted to talk about that.
This was one of the first major films shot completely on digital video, and it very much carries that aesthetic with it.
Yep.
It's very DV camera heavy, very naturalistic in shots, a lot of high shutter speed, really, jumpy stuff, especially when you get to the zombies. I think it all plays into the overall tone of the movie, interestingly. The one thing I'll say about it, though, is a lot of the shots themselves are badly dated. While the sequencing is good between shots, the shots themselves...
The image quality is just kind of low.
I don't even mind the image quality too much. There's too many Dutch angles.
Yes, that is exactly what it is.
I think that's the crux of it, is you don't get many just like straight on shots. Everything is crooked.
Also, there's a lot of times where, like, they'll break the 180 during action scenes, or they'll just have like the pacing and like the cuts be so frenetic and so tight that like you can't understand what is going on. Most of the time it's to the benefit of it. Like I'm not really a big advocate for that. I tend to like my shots to be like well paced, well sequenced, and like maybe to be able to understand what's going on. Even in like horror, I tend to prefer like clear blocking. Here, like it does most of the time like serve its effect of being like jarring, confusing. There are times where I think it doesn't, and it's just utter chaos, and it sort of becomes white noise because you can't really see what's going on. You can't tell, like, so you kind of lose any like grip on it. And so it's kind of hard to be like worried for anyone if you don't know if they're okay or not.
This movie is one of the few instances where I think that kind of camera work and editing works. I agree with you most of the time. I prefer more clear blocking in action sequences and shots where I can actually like follow the action. John Wick is like the prime modern example of doing that right.
Yeah. To be fair, like to do that often, like you need a much larger budget. You need to really spend more time with the zombies if you're going to have like cleaner blocking. Like,
well, I think that the cleaner blocking would actually not work as well in this movie solely because of like the nature of the zombies. They are enraged, they're frenzied, they're animalistic. And I think that using such disorienting camera work and editing techniques enhances that feeling of being chased by like a frenzied beast, you know? It's not like a group of people like fighting. I want to see how they're hitting each other or not hitting each other and stuff like that. I think this movie is very indicative of its time for the early 2000s because like the same era we've talked about before as like the Bourne movies that like really popularized that like handheld shaky cam action stuff. And
well, at least
I think it works here. I think it works here, though.
Most of the time in this movie, they don't rely on shaky camera as much as they rely on just quick cuts.
Yeah.
And I'll take quick cuts over shaky cam every day.
Sure.
Shaky cam is just a good way to like piss me off and give me a migraine. I was never like pissed at the film. Like,
the fighting in this movie is not about like martial prowess or technique or anything.
No, well,
it's survival. You know,
see, I think that you could do it with cleaner shots, but you need more of a budget to hire like extras who are like really physically capable to demonstrate like how like almost like superhumanly angry these zombies are. They have to use these quick cuts and stuff to make us think that these zombies are faster than, you know, the extras are capable of. And if you could, you know, use other like cinema tricks to show us that, like to show us like their rage and like clearly demonstrate that, I think it'd be pretty spooky, but I think it'd also require a great deal of money to pull that off.
I don't know if I agree. I think this is a perfect case of the medium building synchronicity between the style and what they're going at because of how quick and frenetic all the cutting is. It really feels like you're on the edge of being caught up to at any given time. And I think if you had cleaner shots and cleaner sequences,
then I could see that I was about to be caught at any given time.
Yeah, exactly. You would be able to see it ahead of time. The idea is the sequencing itself gives you the feeling that the characters are experiencing directly.
Yeah, it happens so fast you don't have time to see it coming. And that often happens when the infected attack the characters in this movie. It's almost always without warning. The camera work sort of facilitates that in a way that cleaner techniques would not.
And it's not just the use of quick cuts, it's the use of a lot of really tight close-ups.
Yes.
With people running in tight close-ups and with a high shutter speed like they have, it just feels so choppy and so frenetic.
And I like that they use, in some of like the chase sequences, they use long lenses so you don't have as great of an idea of like depth of field, so it's hard to gauge like how close the zombies are to the people that they're chasing because the depth of field is so shallow. I really like that kind of stuff. You don't have time to stop and look over your shoulder and see how close they are. You just got to keep running or they're going to get you. They're not the slow, shambling, unavoidable, impending doom of the old zombies. They're something new and scarier? I don't know. I don't know if fast zombies are really scarier than other zombies.
Slow zombies are pretty spooky just because that sense of like the inevitable march of death is quite spooky.
It's more existential. It's like you can run, but they're always going to be there and there's always going to be so many of them. It's like you're really just prolonging the inevitable.
Right. I think it's spookier from like a more mature perspective.
And I feel like Danny Boyle is a weird director for me because I'm so hit or miss with his films. And he definitely has a distinct style. Like, this is not the only movie he's used some of those stylistic tropes. But I think it works better in this one than a lot of his later films. Give me this over Slumdog Millionaire any day.
Oh, God. Yeah, seriously.
But I think the real magic of this movie is both, you know, the subjective camera and the way things about the world and the world building are revealed in a very organic way.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like a very exposition heavy film, even though there is exposition. Like when you meet new characters, like they fill you in a little bit more on like what's going on, because you're with Cillian Murphy, you have no idea how these events came to be. It feels natural. I think that's probably Alex Garland's dialogue. The dialogue is pretty good, I think.
Oh, it's quite good for the most part.
I think the acting is pretty solid across the board as well.
I would give a lot of props to the production design as well. The things that stick out to me and the things that I remember the most about this movie are like the window with the flashing lights, or on that ceiling of that building, all of the buckets that are scattered about the whole ceiling.
He's been using to catch rainwater in.
And even at the bottom of that building, the tower of shopping carts. I think these are little details that like build the world so much without really explaining anything directly.
Right. What does the world look like in post-apocalypse, but without having to like have exposition to explain things directly. Yeah, you're absolutely right. The production design's fantastic.
And well worth mentioning.
And like, speaking of that, one thing that I'm always impressed by every time I see this movie, because like I don't think this movie had a huge budget. It certainly doesn't appear to be a high budget film, but in that opening sequence, man, they sure did close down a lot of London to get like some of these like really wide shots. Like,
oh yeah, when I talk about like needing a bigger budget, that's not to say that this film didn't have one. Like,
yeah,
it clearly had something.
Or they had like a plug in the government who was like willing to make some things happen for them, because like that always impresses me. The scene of Cillian Murphy wandering around London trying to figure out what's going on, because it's like
it looks so good.
It's like major metropolitan parts of the city. Like right on the Thames, and they had to dress all of that. They had to make it a mess and make it look like people have left here in a panic.
I was reading
impressive.
a little more into that, and apparently they just stopped traffic from like 6 to 7 a.m. and they had an hour to
first
shoot
thing in the
all
morning
of that on like a Sunday, which is crazy. Like they got a lot of mileage out of that material.
The fact that they were able to dress those sets so quickly too, as well as get the shots.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, and I think that kind of like, I'm sure they had to hurry, so the shots are not like flashy or anything. I think that really helps engage with that level of like naturalism that the rest of the film has. Some of that feels almost voyeuristic, you know, like you're like just watching this lone man wander around this abandoned city.
One sequence I want to mention too that really stands out because it feels like they dropped a lot of budget into it and it feels over the top to the point of kind of comical is the giant gas explosion.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, when they blow up the gas station. Oh, yeah, that's right. The wide shot of it is like obviously CG, but they did blow up that gas station, didn't they?
Yeah, and it's like a big set piece it's for like, a moment there.
It felt kind of reminiscent of like when they blow up the gas station at the end of Maximum Overdrive.
Yeah,
it's like,
exactly.
It's like, okay, we've got one shot at this, so let's get 5 cameras set up, and we're gonna use all of these angles.
I paid for 5 cameras. I'm getting 5 cameras worth of this.
Yeah, well, I mean,
explosion.
we can't reset to 1 after this. We gotta make sure we get a good shot. That's a good point, because like in the grand scheme of the movie, that part feels so inconsequential. Kind of.
Yeah, it really does. Like, there's never a huge set piece in the same respect. Like, you get your fair share of interesting set pieces beyond that, but you can't top or follow a giant explosion.
And like they don't have much of a reason to really blow up the gas station. Like, it's kind of a distraction, I guess. But, you know, it's not like some big plan to like help them escape or get somewhere and lure all the zombies away. You know, it's just like, oh, well, fuck, let's fucking blow up the gas station. Fuck it. I think the only other set piece that comes close is like the big mansion at the end where the soldiers have holed up, and when all the zombies attack them at night and they're just running across the lawn and like hitting landmines and being shot at and stuff. That felt like a big budget moment.
Yeah,
I like
for
that
sure.
part.
I think one of my favorite set pieces was just what was it, Frank? Was that his name?
Oh yeah, Brendan Gleeson.
Yeah, like it was like Frank's home. After all of the darkness, all the chaos and pandemonium, to have them find Frank as this like heroic figure at the top of the stairs with a riot shield. Like
Yeah, he's great.
he just immediately comes across as like this like fresh breath of air and safety, and he's such a believable character too.
Such a good dad.
Yeah,
You know,
I love the
With
Frank
these
character.
kind of movies too, you always expect duplicitous motives with characters,
Yeah.
especially good characters on the front.
Right. You do get that in this
Yes,
movie towards
absolutely,
the end,
absolutely.
but not from
But
Frank.
Not from
Right,
Frank.
there are still good people. Like there are good people, there are bad people. You know,
And,
It's
like-
not that nihilistic. to the point.
exactly. No, and I honestly I think it's one of the greatest. It's the biggest saving grace of this.
And
film.
the bad people don't show up until the end. Like everybody Cillian Murphy meets up till that point is, you know, like when he first meets like what's her face, Selena, is that her name? And the other dude she's with, they're kind of standoffish and like jerks a little bit. Like Selena's kind of a bitch to him for a while, but they're still good people. Like they're still helping him, you know? Like it's not just like, oh, immediately the whole world goes to shit and everybody's a monster all of a sudden. They save that for the third act.
For the sneaking mission.
Yeah, for the sneaking mission. No, Frank is great. He's probably my favorite character. Also, like, Brendan Gleeson is definitely my favorite actor in this movie. I always love seeing him show up. Thought it was funny that they let Cillian Murphy keep his Irish accent, but they made Brendan Gleeson have, like, an English accent. But he pulled it off. He's got range.
Oh, for sure.
But yeah, he's a great character because you get that little breath of fresh air when you meet him and Hannah, and they're like safe for the night and like can sleep in a bed and be comfortable. But you know, then there's still other problems. It's not like, okay, we made it to a safe place, we're gonna be okay. It's like, well, we don't have supplies here. We're going to run out of water and food, and we're not going to be able to stay here. Another moment that I really like, too, is like when they get out to where the blockade is supposed to be, like where they hear the signal on the radio, they hear there's military there and they think, okay, this is where we're going to get to and we're going to be safe. And it's like Frank is so optimistic and cheery for the entire journey. And then like when they get there and see that nobody's there, like seeing the way that he kind of breaks down and starts to like lose his temper because he was so set on them getting to this place and being safe that when he's confronted with a different reality that it like really deeply affects him and ends up getting him killed, and his death is tragic.
Yeah, I love his rage sequence because it's one of the more believable ones I've seen in films, and not because of his performance, which is great, but because of the other actors and how they're just kind of awkwardly standing there.
Yeah.
Like, it's very genuine. It's very real. That touches on a big theme of this movie, which is morality. How you sort of keep your cool during like apocalyptic times, and those sorts of themes in other apocalyptic films like Mad Max and stuff aren't always addressed the same way. And I think it's cool seeing like Frank's character approaching it so perfectly. Like, and it's nice to see someone like doing everything right in that respect, like early on. You know, like Frank still like takes time to enjoy the little things. He still like has he makes sure to get some like good scotch at the store and like savor those moments, because it's all they have.
When Cillian Murphy and Naomi Harris show up to his apartment, the first thing he does is like, what do we have that we can all like toast, that we can celebrate that you guys are here? It's like, oh, let's break out Mom's creme de menthe. And it's like, that's such a fun, quirky little scene where it's like they all are just like drinking this like cheap green liqueur because that's all they have, but like it's the symbolic gesture that makes it important. You got to hold on to those little pieces of hope and joy in the apocalypse. And that's why we're like everything really just immediately goes so far south, like when Frank dies. Like he is like the optimistic center of the party, and when he's gone, everything gets bad.
It's a real turning point in the movie.
Yeah.
I feel like this movie pretty radically shifts in the last third of the movie once Frank dies and they get to the military base.
Yeah, the occupied mansion.
Yeah, it really goes into that classic zombie territory of the humans are the true evil, akin to Dawn of the Dead.
Except instead of in Dawn of the Dead, where it's just some yeehaw bikers throwing pies in the faces of zombies, here it's rapey soldiers.
I like how they sort of use like the metaphor of the dinner to give that away. They're also trying to find their morale and their bright spots. And so one of the guys is like dressed up as a chef, and they've made this special meal in this big mansion, and they're all sitting down by candlelight, having this meal that's beans and, other like store food.
Canned shit.
Yeah, and like the chef makes the chef quote, like soldier makes a big deal about that he's made omelets, and they're made out of really bad eggs, and so they can't eat them.
Yeah,
and it's
so that like celebratory moment is spoiled.
Yep.
And
by
then,
a lot of bad eggs.
That's right.
And guess what the soldiers turned out to be?
A lot of bad eggs.
That's right.
Isn't that also the scene where Christopher Eccleston has his thing about this is just people killing people, like what we've always done? Like this is kind of just like mankind as we are at our like basis.
Just Daleks killing Daleks.
Right. Yeah. Doctor Who over here. He's pretty good. I think
he's much more fitting in this role than quirky Doctor Who.
Yeah,
like, this is where he belongs.
He plays a good villain.
Yeah, yes, he does. Or just a soldier character, a serious role. He does serious roles quite nicely, and I like him in those. And I don't hate Doctor Who, but that's all their thing. I think it's a quirky character. I thought it was a weird choice to reboot the franchise.
Don't get me started on Doctor Who.
Yeah, we shouldn't.
We're not going to do that.
Get people upset.
That scene is a really nice foreshadowing of like the bad things to come, because like when they find the soldiers in the first place, like they don't seem evil.
They seem great.
They don't seem sinister, they seem militant as soldiers are, and like hard men, but
also hard times,
right?
You gotta get
but
by
like they have this whole like big mansion that they've sequestered and set up like mines in the lawn and like razor wire and shit. Like yeah, it's fortified, so it's like they have found safety, apparently, seeming safety, and so like it does sort of feel like a bit of a brief respite after Frank's death, but no, then turns out people are the real monsters. Imagine that.
I think they handle the shift from playful fraternity to toxic masculinity really well. The turning point is really the big sequence where tons of zombies are running in and they're just going all yeehaw on them.
Yeah, they turn into like fucking soccer hooligans. Right, lads.
Yeah, well, I think the turn is really interesting because I think the whole crux of that whole third act is they're so repressed sexually from being an all-male group in an apocalypse that they're sacrificing their morals for sort of bestial pleasures.
Yeah, and I think Christopher Eccleston's sort of like turn is handled in a believable way, not justifiable by any means, but like you can follow his logic. It feels real, He tells Cillian Murphy, like, I caught one of the boys the other day with his gun in his mouth because he said there was nothing to live for and there's no future. So I sent out the broadcast and I promised them women because women mean a future. And it's like, that's fucking creepy. And, evil, but it has a kind of perverse logic to it, you know, especially for like these kinds of people.
As a matter of fact, it's not too far from like the realities of history and wartime,
Right.
And like horrifying colonial accounts. I mean,
Hey, the British were great at colonialism.
oh boy, weren't they? Good God,
They
Maybe
were well
some of the-
practiced for this.
Some of the best until we came along.
see the Nightingale for more colonialism horror.
Yeah, right.
But, you know, little has changed on that front, so they were just regressing. It's believable and horrifying and kind of wretched. People are terrible.
It's certainly nihilistic, yeah.
I'd be remiss to not bring up The Last of Us right around now, but I know that you two have played it. So
I haven't played it, but I've watched a playthrough.
I mean, don't
okay.
spoil
Yeah, I
anything
wouldn't spoil
for
it for
listeners,
anyone else. But the pacing of The Last of Us, you know, has a lot of similar moments.
I'm sure they were very inspired by this film.
Oh, I mean, thoroughly. There's no question on that front. I think that if you know, enjoyed like 28 Days Later, like the narrative for The Last of Us, like I think like takes it that extra mile. You want to talk about like later adaptations that actually did their own thing with it and managed to tell like an original story. That's The Last of Us. And it has those, you know, those similarly paced moments where you meet good people and they meet their ends and the rest. It's well done.
Well, what I really like is Cillian Murphy's impetus for like deciding to fight back. I love that turning point for him because he hasn't been completely useless up till this point, but he hasn't done a whole lot. He's always kind of been in the background while like other people have like done the killing or stuff to keep them alive. Just like see how Naomi Harris's character behaves, or like even Brendan Gleeson with his fucking riot shield. But you know, we have the scene of Cillian Murphy going into like the gas station to look around, and you know he gets attacked by the infected
the child,
boy,
yeah,
and like he kills the kid, but that's like his first real kill, and it's like a child. It's infected, but still a child. But when he's like lying out there in the woods after he's escaped being shot by the soldiers and looks up and sees an airplane flying over in the distance and realizes that despite what everybody else has been telling them, that maybe the world has not ended, like one of the other soldiers, the only actual good soldier who they did kill, was saying too, which honestly is, I think, really fantastic world building, because like the whole implication is that it's just the UK that's infected, because this is not like a virus like something like, COVID that stays asymptomatic but contagious for a few days before it turns you. Like these zombies are turned within 30 seconds of, you know, contact with blood or saliva. We even hear somebody say it at one point. I think it's that same soldier. Like, how would this make it across like borders? How would this make it across the sea? Like, how would you carry this? And it's like, oh yeah, that's a good point. So maybe the UK is just quarantined. It's a big fucking island. And when Cillian Murphy realizes that, and realizes that there's actually maybe hope of rescue, or hope that the world is still going on after this and this isn't the end, that's when he decides, I'm gonna fucking go back and save Naomi Harris and and Frank's daughter and fuck up these soldiers.
And the movie turns into what Metal Gear Survive should have been. Just a huge stealth mission.
Utilizing zombies as a distraction. I thought that was fucking great. He goes back to the mansion in the rain and frees the one infected soldier that they have chained up in the yard. And just like the havoc that wreaks upon all of the rest. I love that whole sequence.
It's fun. It's definitely fun.
I agree. I like the da 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 music that's going on the whole time too. It's been used a lot. I didn't realize that like the Dying Light theme aped it like so closely.
That's a game I haven't played.
I haven't played that game either. I think the
a great theme.
music in general in this movie is fun. It's
Pretty
very
good.
post-rock.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of
You know?
proggy stuff, very explosions in the sky.
It works better at certain times than it does at others.
It feels a little dated at times.
I really like it in the sequence you're talking about, Cleveland, like at the end during that whole action scene. But like it feels like a little bit too much when Cillian Murphy's walking around London at the beginning. It's almost like too high energy for like how empty everything is. Like it's like fucking pumping and like getting louder and escalating. It's like the dude's just walking around empty streets, like picking up money off the ground.
Plastic
and, like,
bags flittering in the wind.
Right, exactly. Right. It's it feels a little too high energy, but yeah, in general, I would agree. It's fitting.
Yeah, and I feel like while a lot of the soundtrack could be considered dated, it's a far cry from like Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead ending with Down with the Sickness.
Oh man, I still haven't seen that movie.
That's a movie we'll cover this year, probably, when the new Zack Snyder zombie movie comes out on Netflix.
If it comes out.
It's finished production. So,
okay, so it probably
So it'll probably come out. Who knows when? Netflix is always secretive about that stuff. But.
You know, I would say just like in general, I think you say some of the music is kind of dated, and it is. I think in general, this movie's kind of dated.
Yes.
I don't think it's dated in a terrible way. I mean, it's very much like a product of when it was made, like just watching it. I wouldn't be surprised, like, if a lot of younger audiences would watch something like this and be like, why does it look so ugly? Like, the aesthetic is very... It's not pretty by any means. It's just like you said, you know, it's shot on fucking HD video.
You can buy the camera it was shot on for like $300 nowadays.
Right. Which is like way cheaper than the cameras that we were using in fucking film school, like prosumer level cameras.
Yeah, look at fucking Red cameras costing like $50,000 per camera, and you're just like, oh, this makes sense. You know, even considering this was 02.
Yeah.
And it's today.
But I mean, also, like, look at some of the other recent movies we've talked about that came out in 02, 03. Cabin Fever, The Descent. Those movies are also very much products of when they were made, but aesthetically, they have a lot more going. And I don't think it's a complaint in relation to 28 Days Later. I think you made a great point earlier, Ben, when you said that, like, the aesthetic really matches the tone of the film, because I think it does. It feels almost like documentary for a sort of very narrow view of like, or very specific view of the apocalypse from like just a couple of characters. Like that kind of natural, unbiased kind of perspective works really well, or the aesthetic that accompanies that, I should say.
You know, there's a lot of movies in that era and before that I would call timeless. This movie is not necessarily one of them.
No.
You know, but at the same time, I think the lo-fi DV style informs the tone of the movie. It's a bold choice to make.
It's one of those movies that might be considered badly dated just by everything that it has influenced that comes after it, just because so many of these tropes have become so prevalent and so overdone that if you don't have kind of the context of what this movie did for the genre, when watching it, it's like I could see people, like new viewers, thinking that is like boring and also like cliche. I think it does drag a bit at times, but I don't think it's really a very boring film.
No, I thought the pacing was fine. One thing, it's not really a gripe about, but I think it's a conversation point, is it's a little like nice guy-y the way that like Cillian Murphy like bashes the dude's brains out, and then immediately after he and
Naomi
Harris like have like a makeout scene. I thought that was a little weird. They'd like dressed her up, and like it was a really like cringy, like rough sequence, and like her character had been through so much, and for her to be like in the mood like during that was just a little weird to
It's
me.
inappropriate timing, but it didn't bother me because they set it up before by having them sort of start falling for each other and making out before all of the shit hit the fan. And she went from thinking that, because in that scene when he comes in and kills the soldiers that are holding her, she thinks he's infected because he's so brutal, like in taking his vengeance on these soldiers. And then so she's ready to kill him, and then has that moment of relief when she realizes that he's not infected and that they're safe for the moment.
I mean, she's a strong character, so like her like reclaiming that like is, I think there's an argument to be made for like it being totally fine.
It feels
like,
it feels believable, but you know, it's that kind of thing that like a lot of movies do, where it's like, this isn't really the time for a kiss now, is it? But like, we want to have some kind of like romantic catharsis, you know, for these characters whom have had the sexual tension building between them for the whole movie. So, you know, it's fine. It didn't bother me too much. There's better times and places for these things, folks, but, you know, it's not a huge mark on the movie, I don't think. It's short enough.
Have you guys seen 28 Weeks Later?
I have not.
I haven't either.
Did Danny Boyle do that
No.
one? I didn't
No,
think
he didn't.
so.
He
but Cillian Murphy's in it, isn't he?
I don't think he's
I don't think
even
so
in
either.
it.
Oh.
I think it's Imogen Poots, who's great. I love her. She's great in Green Room. I just saw her in Vivarium. I remember it did better at the box office, and it was kind of a pretty popular movie when it came out. It just kind of escaped me when it came out.
It's one of those sequels that doesn't feel necessary, especially if it wasn't made by like the people who did the original. I would have to see it to say for sure, but it feels like a case of a studio trying to capitalize on a property they own and bring in a different team to try to capture what the first one did, and probably to lesser results. I don't know, maybe it had a bigger budget, so maybe some people liked it more cuz
It looks like Danny Boyle and Alex Garland produced it, but that's about the extent of it.
Yeah, and like
Idris Elba is in it apparently.
Oh, fun. Okay.
Alongside Rose Byrne and Jeremy Renner.
Oh, weird.
It's a cast.
I just rewatched Sunshine the other day.
Yeah, I saw that sitting on the table there.
Collaboration between Alex Garland and Danny Boyle.
How's it hold up?
You know, it's a pretty fucking solid movie. I like a lot of things about it. I think it kind of falls apart in
third act.
In the third
Yes,
act,
sir.
yeah. And I think that there's.
I do agree with that.
I think that there's some.
The hard science fiction was fine, and they didn't need to take it down that weird route.
I think there's some kind of hacky moments, but you know, Sunshine feels more like an Alex Garland thing to me than a Danny Boyle thing, which is weird. I would say that at this point, Alex Garland has far eclipsed Danny Boyle in terms of like his creative output and quality.
His auteurship.
Yes, absolutely.
Garland's eclipsed just about everyone at this point, as far as I'm concerned, between Annihilation and Devs and Ex Machina.
And Ex Machina,
Like,
yeah.
He's the best out there. Like,
I'm inclined
right
to
now.
agree. Yeah, he's probably my favorite living filmmaker right now.
Like, we'll see how Denis Villeneuve does with Dune, but
I also just
it's-
rewatched Blade Runner 2049, and it holds up. It's a good fucking movie.
cells within cells. Yeah, man, I love that film.
Yeah, check out Devs. It's
Oh, yeah,
really worth
Jesus
it.
If you want to see
Christ.
more like Alex Garland, like you want to see like Alex Garland now, like after 28 days.
How far he's come, yeah, because like I do think that there are things in the 28 Days Later script that feel amateurish. I don't think there's anything bad, but you know, there's some,
Signs of a starting young writer, you
Yeah.
know, who's you know getting their go in the industry.
I think it's one of
those sorts
his.
of things
I
are
think
generally
it was
forgivable.
one of his first film scripts. I know he got started as a novelist. Like that's how he got picked up into the film industry originally. I think is because people liked his books. I think there's even growth between 28 Days Later and Sunshine, just in terms of like concept. I think 28 Days Later is a little better of a movie. But once again, not the show to talk about how great Alex Garland is, because he fucking is. And watch Devs if you haven't.
It's on Hulu.
It's on Hulu. great binge-worthy content for your quarantine. Do you guys want to rate this?
Yeah,
I don't
we
think I
might
have
as
anything
well
else to
go
say.
ahead.
I think this movie holds up pretty well. It shows its age in certain ways, but still has a lot of good content. Really interesting to see how it's affected the zombie genre over the preceding almost 20 years. Good acting. Some fun gore effects. We didn't talk too much about that, but there's some nice bloody stuff.
The blood vomit is great.
The blood vomit is good. I love the blood vomit.
I always love some blood vomit.
Yeah. It's still a pretty strong film. I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 5.
I'm going to mirror you in a lot of respects. I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5 as well. I'm very hit or miss with Danny Boyle's work, but this is probably my favorite Danny Boyle movie. While dated, a lot of it still holds strong, and a lot of it is clearly influential to the rest of modern zombie movies.
Much like Hannah in the third act, I'm going to hold up the mirror and also give it 4 stars.
Nice. Oh yeah, that was a cool sequence that we didn't really talk about when she's hiding behind the mirror and the zombie is like looking at its reflection. Liked that little moment. Okay, cool. Well, that'll be a unanimous 4 out of 5 pods for 28 days later. Next week, we're doing something a little bit different. Friend of the pod, Aaron, reached out to us on Twitter and said, "Hey boys, can you do Haunt? I have some feelings about it." And not only are we going to do Haunt, which is a film that I had never fucking heard of before now.
Big same.
It came out last year. It is produced by Eli Roth and written and directed by the 2 guys who wrote A Quiet Place. So other than that, I don't really know much about it. But not only are we going to be talking about it, but Aaron is also going to call into the show and join us for that episode. So listen back next week for another guest episode. Yeah. We're looking forward to it. Cleveland, do we have a sponsor this week?
We have a sponsor every week.
You keep saying that.
And this week is it's no different. Let me just swim over to the sponsor shelf and see what it has for us. I'll be right back after I've dried off the blood. Sometimes my hands are too dry.
Too dry?
Yes.
Interesting.
Sometimes they're too dry, but I've been playing a lot of this new game called Fighter Frenzy Deluxe Special. It's a mobile app, and when you play it, your hands get really wet. So this episode is brought to you by Fighter Frenzy Raid Time Attack, and it'll get your hands nice and damp.
Is that one of those PTW paid to wet games?
Yeah, it is. It is actually. I know we've been trying to land one as a sponsor for like weeks now, and we finally did. The shelf has granted us a paid to wet game. So now go out and get wet with Fight Attack Mission Kill Attack.
Raid.
Yeah.
The insweatening.
The insweat
for when your hands need inwettening.
I mean, what else can you say?
Nothing. Other than that'll bring us to the end of this week's episode. If you like the show, go on over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star rating and a nice review, or anywhere else you listen to podcasts that you can leave a rating. Do that and help us work our way up in the charts. We would very much appreciate it. You can follow us on Twitter at PodPeoplePod and on letterboxd.com/PodPeoplePod, where you will find a list of all the films we've talked about on the show with our average ratings and links to those episodes. I am on Twitter at Deep State Ozzy.
I'm on Twitter at Mr. Sheets.
And I'm blasting off tweets left and right for Light Arc Studio. I'm not tweeting too often because we're busy working up our next update for It Stares Back. Go check it out. We're on Steam in early access, and we're spooky and fun and pretty cheap right now too.
And most importantly, not pay to win.
That's right.
Microtransaction free.
Yeah, and your
to
hands.
No, the wedding is free.
Yeah, every time.
The inwetting is free.
You can also check out our Discord at our website, lightarcstudio.com. And also check out my art station. Just search Cleveland Mosier. Look at some cool paintings, because some of those cool paintings could be made for you. My commissions are open. Come and check me out, and I'd love to do some art for you.
All right. Well, I have been, much like Cillian Murphy, naked this entire time.
We didn't talk about Cillian Murphy's penis.
We didn't.
Which we do get to see in full in this movie.
That's correct.
Is Boris Johnson.
That's right. Bye-bye.